I wanted to talk about next the understanding the role of the survival instinct. And this when we understand this, it helps us to understand why we get stuck so that we can start making changes in order to get unstuck. Now, the survival instinct, the instinct to survive, it is the most basic function of the human brain. Now, this basic function, that instinct to survive, it is what keeps us breathing. It's what keeps our hearts beating. It is what helps us to respond when there's danger in a fight or flight response. So when we perceive danger, whatever that danger might be, we immediately will go into a fight or flight response. It's a hormonal response. Our brains are constantly taking in information and interpreting it. So we information in, then we interpret it, and based on our interpretation, we take action. And this basic survival instinct is always looking to interpret and determine if we are safe. Safety can be physical, it can be emotional, it can be mental, it can be spiritual, it can be financial, it can be social. There's a lot of different types of safety that we can be talking about. And so any threat to any of those areas of our safety, or any threat to the stability of our basic human needs, that includes food, shelter, water, clothing, employment, property, family, any of those things is going to cause us stress, and it's going to create a stress response. So the fight or flight response is also called a stress response. And what that is it's triggered by a release of hormones that either prompt us to stay and fight or to run away and flee. That's the fight or flight. So I'm going to either fight the danger or I'm going to run away from the danger. And that's the stress response. Now, during the stress response, all the bodily systems go into keeping us alive in whatever we've perceived as it being a dangerous situation. Now, when the real or perceived danger or threat is gone, the normal response is that stress hormone disappears out of our system and we return to our normal state. And that normally only takes a minute or two to bring us back to that point. And so I remember being at a workshop once and someone gave this example. And if you imagine if I were to drop a book on the floor from a fairly high height, and it hits the floor and it's a bang. And if you didn't see what made that bang, that stress response is going to get triggered, and you're immediately your brain's going to be saying, what was that? Am I in danger? Is something scary happening? And then you look, you see the book on the floor, you realize that's what made the noise, and immediately that stress response leaves your body again. Now, another example of this might be when we think about the animal kingdom. A common example of this would be a zebra and a lion, where the zebra is feeling the threat from the lion and everything goes into survival mode. It's going to try to flee or take flight from that situation as quickly as it can. If it's not able to run away, it's going to fight for its life. Now, after that threat is gone, if it's escaped the lion and now the zebra can relax, what you will often see in the natural world with zebras and many other animals is their body will shake. And that helps to move that stress hormone out of the body more quickly. And so that is just that first tip that I want to bring up, that if you're feeling a stress response and you're feeling overwhelmed, and you're having trouble getting rid of that stress response, even though the threat is not imminent, moving your body can be a really good way. We can just literally shake it off. But there's also a third response to stress, and this is one that I'm certainly seeing a lot of people seem to be struggling with at this point. And the third response to stress is the freeze response. And so you'll notice that in your notes there as well. It's the freeze response. And that is most common when fight or flight fails us, or when there's a prolonged period of stress or repeated stress. So in our situation that we're facing in our lives right now, a lot of people are feeling that stress on a constant basis. People are scrolling through social media. They're seeing all the bad news. They're watching all of the things that are happening around the world. And that is creating more stress, and it starts to get you feeling stuck. So whatever your circumstances are, and we've all encountered moments like this. I don't think any of us have encountered a time where it's as prolonged as this. And some situations will last longer than others. And we can get permanently stuck if we're not careful. It can feel like we're drowning. We can be drowning because of what we're seeing on the world stage. We can be drowning in the stress of relationship struggles, with money issues, with a health crisis, with job issues, employment issues. And sometimes we can be absolutely overcome and overwhelmed by these multiple forces, especially when they're happening all at the same time. And so this is definitely something we are experiencing right now with the global health crisis and a global recession happening. People are struggling with job losses. People are around their families sometimes way too much, and that can put some strain on some relationships as well. And if you already had a strained relationship, being around each other this much more is definitely not helpful. So it's also really easy when we're experiencing all this stress. It's like we want to freeze, we want to shut down, kind of like that picture of the ostrich with its head buried in the sand. It's like pretend it's not happening. And during this time, it's easy to fall into unhealthy habits around nutrition or exercise or addictive behaviors, such as drugs or alcohol, technology-based addictions like online gambling, pornography, social media. All of these things can become the way that we cope in an unhealthy way. So being aware of those things is really important right now, because when we can recognize the magnitude of the impact of stress, this is again in your notes, when we recognize the impact of stress in our lives, that is the first step in empowering ourselves to not just manage it, but overcome it. I'll say that again. So recognizing the magnitude and impact of stress in our lives is the first step in empowering ourselves to not just manage it, but overcome it. It's acknowledging that there are things outside of our control and then focusing on the things that are within our control. One of my favorite writers is Dr. Viktor Frankl. And now he was a Jewish Holocaust survivor. So when it comes to suffering, when it comes to hardship, he saw this to an extreme. He was imprisoned in Auschwitz during the Holocaust. So one of the major themes in his writing was that no matter what the circumstances are, we always have a choice in how we're going to respond to them. No matter what the world strips away from you, you always have a choice in how you will respond to it. You have a choice to maintain your dignity, to maintain your self-respect, your sense of self-worth. These are all things that no one can take away from you. You can make the choice to give those up, but no one can take them from you. And so if we're going to switch from surviving into thriving, this is going to require a conscious decision. So I'll say that again. Switching from surviving to thriving requires a conscious decision to take control and manage stress and to choose to fully engage in living. So even though many of us are stuck in our houses, we're not going out, it's really hard right now, but we need to be fully engaged in the act of living, even though there's some restrictions in how we might be doing that right now. So some tips for managing stress. I'm just going to give you a few of these right now. If you want more, let me know. I can give you some more tips. I also, if you scroll down in the group feed, I also did a discussion about stress management last week that you can go and watch as well. So the first thing, and I mentioned this already, is moving your body. Getting your body moving is a great way to deal with stress. It helps to move that hormone through our bodies and out of our bodies. Breathing is another big one. Grounding, prayer, meditation. These are some other things that we can be doing. Finding ways to have fun, getting engaged in meaningful and productive activities, finding something that you can do besides just sitting, scrolling through social media, watching Netflix. That is not going to get you very far if you want to thrive. It's kind of that hibernating state. It's kind of that burying your head in the sand. It's the using distraction, and distraction can be really useful to manage stress in the short term, but in the long term, the not dealing with the rest of life, the not engaging in the rest of life will actually cause you more stress. So it's really important that we get involved and make a point of doing things that are and valuable and bring us joy. Consider your activities over the last 2 weeks. We all had health education in high school. We all know that it is important to move our bodies. And I've just mentioned some of the benefits of moving your body. So when you're in a time of stress, making sure you're finding a way to move. If you're stuck in your house, there's lots of online exercise programs. If you can have some aerobic exercise outdoors, this would be really beneficial as well. We need outdoor time. We need our vitamin D. We need the fresh air. If you're in an area where you can't get outside, maybe you live in an apartment building and your area is restricted in terms of the movement, about where you can go and what you can do. If you have a balcony, exercising on your balcony. It might be embarrassing, but it will get you the fresh air that you need, and some of that vitamin D that you need. The next one is I stop and notice what's right in my life. So taking time to notice what's going on in your life, really taking that time to be self-reflective. And right now we have lots of time. So being self-reflective, noticing what is going right in my life right now. I make mistakes and acknowledge them freely. People who don't acknowledge their mistakes often find it's very stressful because we're trying to cover up those mistakes. So these are just some tips for some good healthy living and some stress management. Meditating 8 to 10 minutes a day, regardless of what type of meditation that might be. This helps to calm down the central nervous system. So when things don't go my way, I search for what I can control in the situation. So we have a lot of situations right now that a lot of people are feeling like life is not going your way. And there's a lot of things that are outside of our control. So really looking at what is within your control right now. When I encounter a personal or professional challenge, I see it as an opportunity to grow. And this situation right now is a personal and professional challenge for a lot of people. So how are you going to use this as a time to grow over the next few weeks, over the next month, however long this lasts for? I have friends with whom I spend time and that I truly enjoy. This is a really important point in stress management, really important point in being able to thrive is we need to have friends that we can connect with. And right now we need to find some creative ways to spend time with those friends because we cannot go over for coffee. We can't go out for dinner. We can't have a games night or whatever the things are that you like to do with your friends. You're not playing in a ball league. You're not doing a lot of the things that maybe normally you might be doing this time of year. So making sure that you are creating space for your friendships and connecting with others, and connecting is going to be one of our major topics later in the week. I feel like my life has a higher purpose. Again, this is super important. We need to feel like our life has value and our life has a purpose. And if you're struggling to figure out what is your purpose right now, and that's something, again, we're going to talk more about that as the week goes on. I did want to point out, though, that quite often we might have this like higher purpose that we see our entire lives are moving in one direction because we have this higher calling. But sometimes there's also what I would call a multi-purpose to life. And that's recognizing that there's things that life is demanding of you right here, right now. And that is your purpose for the moment. And we should be embracing those moment by moment purposes as much as we embrace the bigger overarching sort of purpose that might reign over our lives. Next one, I have the chance to use my gifts and talents daily. So you have lots of gifts and talents. What are you doing to use them? I engage passionately in interests that make time disappear. Right? How many of us are passionately engaged while we're binge watching a television show on Netflix? Most of us are probably not passionately engaged. We're probably only half listening to it, but it's just trying to help the time go by. But finding activities that you can be passionate about is super important. And I wanted to introduce to you this concept of the fulfilled and meaningful life and this model that I've created to help us to understand if we want to have a life that's thriving, a life that's meaningful, a life that's fulfilling and satisfying and joyful and exciting, we need to understand the framework and how to get there.